Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Jon Bernthal just came back in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the Punisher from the Netflix shows during Daredevil Born Again, but he revealed that early on, Marvel actually made him quit. He quit because of what was happening during Daredevil Born Again. So we'll explain what happened behind the scenes because he just did a big interview revealing everything, spilling a whole bunch of tea, what Marvel did to cause him to quit, and what they changed after the fact to make him come back as the Punisher. You have to imagine it was so bad, it literally caused the Punisher to quit wanting to be the Punisher. The big bag of Marvel cash was not enough to convince him to do what they originally wanted him to do. Because even though it sounds like kind of a nightmare behind the scenes, just complete chaos, what came out of it is actually really good. Like going forward, things are looking really good for Jon Bernthal and the Punisher in the MCU. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We are in the middle of Daredevil Born Again episodes. Punisher just came back. He's a big part of this season, so he'll be in multiple more episodes this season, and then some stuff that they've already announced that's happening after Daredevil Born Again Season 1 that we'll talk about during the video, because it's a big part of what Marvel changed behind the scenes to get him to come back as the Punisher after he quit. If you have no idea what's going on, why is Jon Bernthal saying that he quit is the Punisher? Marvel made him quit, and then he decided to eventually come back after some things changed behind the scenes. Rewind several years ago, all the Marvel Netflix shows get canceled one at a time after they end their recent episode run. So Punisher Season 2 happens. It's one of the final shows that Marvel and Netflix canceled. At the time, most of the actors were optimistic about what their futures might be in Marvel just in general, but nobody knew whether they were actually coming back at the time because there was a cooling off period built into all the different shows when Netflix bought them from Marvel Television. This was actually led by a completely different group at Marvel who were making TV shows at that time like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all the Netflix shows, Runaways, all those other shows before Kevin Feige took over Marvel TV. In the Marvel Studios, the movie people started making that stuff during the Disney Plus era. That was basically the demarcating line when the movie people, the Marvel Studios people, started making all the TV shows when Disney Plus launched. So for a couple of years, Kevin Feige was not allowed to do anything with any of those Netflix shows or those characters. Like they just had to sit on a shelf and wait for the cooling off period to go away. That special contractual period built into the Netflix contracts basically ended with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home and Hawkeye, which released around the same time in 2021.
Stop sweating. How do you do that?
Here's where we get to Jon Bernthal and the Punisher. So around the time all those contractual cooling off periods ended for the Marvel Netflix stuff for those characters, and Kevin Feige could use them again however he wanted to, they started to work on creating Daredevil Born Again, the original version of the show with a completely different group of creatives that had a completely different idea for what Daredevil should be doing in the MCU during these episodes. This all started a couple years ago. Remember the timeline on this. So this is before the strikes. This is before Marvel had their big come to Jesus moment where they pulled way back on their output. Secret Invasion sort of cratered and was like a low point for the brand. You have all those Deadpool and Wolverine jokes that happened a little bit later. But really their low point when like things really cratered for them, people mostly point to the release of Secret Invasion as being the bottom of that barrel. Keep in mind that was in 2023, so like we're charting the timeline here. It wasn't that long ago, but it was a couple years because we're in 2025 now. Like it's been a hot minute. The way that Jon Bernthal explains it in his brand new interview here, it was actually that original version of Daredevil Born Again that caused him to quit Marvel and quit being the Punisher. The way he explains it, he says it like this: ultimately, I didn't see it. I didn't see the version of Frank, and what they wanted from Frank really didn't make sense to me. I thought it would not appeal to the fans, and it wouldn't be congruent. It was not something I was really interested in doing, so we had to walk away. Basically saying that he walked away from being the Punisher, like he quit being the Punisher, quit Marvel essentially. Because at the time, he was in the process of signing contracts to come back for that original version of Daredevil Born Again. They like always built a version of Punisher into the story, but what he was doing, obviously, was very different, something that Jon Bernthal was not cool with. This is basically Jon Bernthal trying to say in the nicest possible way that it was all crap. I think I've been doing videos about Daredevil coming back since 2021 when we saw him in Spider-Man No Way Home, because at the time, they'd already hinted that they were going to do a new Daredevil show at some point, but we didn't know exactly what that show was going to be. Recently, they revealed that the original version of Daredevil Born Again, like the version that made John Bernthal quit Marvel, like it was so bad that made him quit, was essentially more of a legal procedural show week to week, like we saw during episode 3 with the trial of the White Tiger. Imagine 9 to 18 episodes of just that kind of stuff, with him not being Daredevil for most of the show, just being Matt Murdock for most of the show.
There's this thing they say in boxing, the best cure for a black eye is fast hand.
What wound up happening is that creative group filmed about 6 to 7 episodes worth of material into an 18-episode season that Marvel had greenlit. Originally, the show was meant to be 18 episodes for season 1. Then the strikes happened in Hollywood and everybody had to pump the brakes on everything, so there was just a lot of time for people to sit around and look at the stuff that they'd already worked on. Kevin Feige, the Marvel people, rewatched all the material for the episodes that they filmed for Daredevil Born Again and basically decided that they thought that it was terrible, fired that creative group, hired back a bunch of the Netflix Marvel people that made those shows, and the new person he hired to be showrunner for Daredevil Born Again to fix the show was the original producer from the Punisher Netflix series. So here's where we get back to John Bernthal's Punisher. John Bernthal explained that it was that producer from the Punisher series named Dario who convinced him to come back as the Punisher, and what Marvel did behind the scenes to change things just in general, like what Kevin Feige did to help bring John Bernthal back, is give John Bernthal creative control of the Punisher character. Basically, more authorship, more control over what happens to him, the way he's expressed, the dialogue, just the way they use him in episodes, what their whole direction with the Punisher is in the future of the MCU. John Bernthal says, they really brought me into the conversation. We really got specific about where Frank is psychologically, where Frank's at physically. So they basically completely rebuilt the Punisher arc during Daredevil Born Again Season 1 together. Then they filmed that. Then Marvel also gave him the Punisher movie that they're doing next year that will release alongside Daredevil Born Again Season 2. John Bernthal revealed that he's actually one of the writers on that now, so that they're literally letting him write his own Punisher movie. It's a special presentation, so it's like a small movie, like it's a much smaller version of a theatrical movie that you would normally see, because typically Marvel spends between like $150 and $250 million on their big theatrical movies. Werewolf by Night is a better example for what their special presentations are like. They're small movies. They spend typically under $100 million, and they're typically under 60 minutes long, like 50, 55 minutes long. You've probably seen a lot of the clips recently of John Bernthal talking about how much he loves the Punisher character, how precious it is to him, and how he wants to serve the fans.
Care very deeply about Frank. I'm really grateful that I'm getting the opportunity to tell the story that I think the fans deserve.
He basically credits that with the reason for them fixing the Punisher from what they originally intended to do with the character. And it sounds like in the original crap version of the show that he was supposed to be in that caused him to quit, he was going to be more of a low-level cameo, and he wasn't going to be doing any Punisher stuff at all. It was going to be a completely different version of the character, like completely unrecognizable compared to the Netflix stuff. Because a lot of you have probably seen this too. They've been talking about this with the new version of Daredevil Born Again, just in general. The Daredevil character, Foggy, Karen Page, everybody else coming back. One of the big things that happened when they made the original version of the show, or they started to make it, is that they wanted to do more of what's called a requel in Hollywood, where it's a reboot and a sequel combined into one, where they started by wanting to do a complete reboot of the characters and just use a couple of the actors from the original Netflix stuff and say that the Netflix stuff was not canon. So they started to make the show with that in mind, and that's why Foggy and Karen Page were in the original version of the show, and they killed them off screen. The original version of Daredevil Born Again actually started with what you saw in Episode 2 and Episode 3. Those were the original Episode 1 and Episode 2s. When the new creative team came along, they shot a completely brand new Episode 1 that we all saw on screen. All that stuff with Karen Page and Foggy Nelson that they baked back into the show. But here's the problem with this. Remember, the original creative team with the version of the show that they decided was crap had already shot about 6 to 7 episodes, so that's why we're seeing so much of the old show stitched in with new material that they filmed turned into the actual episodes. So sometimes you can kind of tell if it's the original version of the show or it's new stuff that they shot. A lot of people complaining that we haven't seen Daredevil back in a Daredevil costume yet, and we're already 4 episodes, like we're almost halfway into Season 1. In the original version of the show, before the creative reboot, he wasn't supposed to put the Daredevil suit back on until at least Episode 6, maybe like the end of Episode 6. Originally, he wasn't supposed to run into Punisher for the first time, like Jon Bernthal wasn't supposed to come back as the Punisher until episode 5. So there was another version of this whole reunion scene that happened in episode 5 that they completely redid when the new creative team came along. They moved it to episode 4, and they also made a couple changes after they filmed this with the new creative team. There are a couple minor creative tweaks. Really good example of this is his bullseye shout out when Punisher is yelling at Matt during their reunion. They just made that a little bit more clear. And another example is during episode 3, when you see that corrupt cop with the Punisher logo kill White Tiger in revenge. Originally, he didn't have the Punisher logo on his vest. They redid that scene to make it clear that it was one of those Punisher cops.
You won't get your hands on somebody, huh?
So one of the funny things here is the more that we learn about what was going on behind the scenes before the big creative reboot, the bigger nightmare it sounds like. And it just sounds like they dodged a real big bullet, and Jon Bernthal was right to stick to his guns and help them come up with the idea for the creative reboot as well, too. There were probably a number of reasons why they did that. Like, it wasn't just because Jon Bernthal quit the show. Kevin Feige, watching over all the stuff that they'd filmed during the strikes, during that long break that they took, just saying, there's a whole lot of stuff here that is not working. We just got to redo a lot of this. But the good news is, going forward, it sounds like Jon Bernthal just has way more control over the Punisher character, and good or bad, just more of the credit and more of the blame will both be on Jon Bernthal with how the Punisher's received in future projects like this new one-shot that they're doing next year. But I think the idea is that at the end of this season, when they confront that group, like they actually team up and they start fighting that group as we've seen in the trailers, they're not completely successful in totally getting rid of them because the anti-vigilante task force is essentially this group of Punisher cops upgraded with way better weapons and gear during season 2, which we've actually seen them filming. So we will see how they wind up ending that arc. But remember, we're about halfway through the show. The way they're talking about arcs and bringing characters back, more Defenders back, it sounds like they plan to do at least 3 seasons of this new Daredevil Born Again series. So both good news and bad news, like Marvel creating and solving their own problem, which sounds like a total Spider-Man kind of thing to do. Like, you created the problem that you yourself are trying to solve. Given all the good news recently, don't you feel a lot more optimistic about the other Marvel Netflix actors coming back too? Like, it sounds like some really good stuff changed behind the scenes recently. I'm still working on my episode 5 trailer video. I'll post that next. Click here for that video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it. And click here for my full episode 4 video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.